and Stephanie and Amy, his assistants. And the reason for the meeting tonight is we are in the process of updating our regional transportation plan. And so the input received from tonight's meeting will be taken back and will be incorporated into the draft plan that will come back before the commission in a few months. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeff. He'll go through all of the different components and what we're looking for this evening, and then you'll have an opportunity to speak publicly if you choose to do so. Okay.
Thank you. Greetings. The one person that I didn't actually meet yet.
Jeff Stone.
Jeff, nice to meet you, Jeff Schwan. And so yeah, the regional transportation plan, I'm just going to give you a little background on what it is, and then a little bit about the funding and where the funding comes from for transportation projects in the region. And then I want to talk to you guys about projects and sort of what the projects that are on the books right now for the future, and what projects you would like to see to help improve transportation options and transportation facilities in your region. So when I'm talking about a region, it's basically Siskiyou County. We do some coordination with the neighboring counties and the state of Oregon, but for the most part, when we talk about region, it's the county. In other areas, the regions might not be separated into just counties because you have more population in urbanized areas. Sometimes they have to make the lines fuzzy, but for Siskiyou and for most rural areas, the region is the county boundaries. So within the region, there are local agencies. This county has a lot of local agencies. So the incorporated cities are basically local agencies. Other folks that are participating certainly are the community, and then other organizations and tribes. So Indian tribes are, they contribute to, they have some of their own funding streams, but also they're part of the federal and state funds that come through the Transportation Commission, through the local agencies, and go out to the projects. So basically, when we're talking about projects, for transportation, the money comes from the federal government, some of it comes from the state government, and then it flows into the region. And when we're funding projects with that public money, we're talking about roads. So building new roads, fixing old ones, maintaining the ones we have. We're talking about bridges. We're talking about transit systems. We're talking about bicycle and pedestrian facilities. We're talking about aviation. We're talking about rail. So that's kind of the realm of transportation funding. In recent years, probably the last 10 years for some people, but shorter than that for others, there's been a kind of an upwelling for the desire to have walkable and bikeable communities and alternative modes of transportation. So improving transit systems to allow better access for people, and providing kids with a different option than getting driven to school by their parents, to be able to walk and bike. And you know, there's inherent problems with the way we've been developing for years, and we haven't always built communities that cater to somebody walking or biking to school or to work or to the doctor's office or something like that. So we always have to keep in context that we're working with the built environment, what's built right now, and we think about what we're going to build in the future. And we hope that, you know, somehow we make the best community we can out of that. So that's kind of the goal for the Transportation Commission, for me as a consultant, for me as a citizen of California, and a planner in general, is that we're trying to make better communities for our future, for us, for our lives, for the kids, whatever. So how we do that is, in the transportation context, this might be too small, but it's just up there for reference. I'll talk about some of these numbers and some of the funding programs. But so transportation is, it's fairly well funded. I mean, we have some challenges with it, but there's still money coming in. We collect gas tax, 18 cents on the federal gas tax and 18 cents on the California gas tax. That might change soon because there was a bill passed a couple days ago through the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee that is talking about a gas tax increase for California, which would help beef up some of these funding programs. But you know, it's not on the books yet, so we're not going to go there. But for the most part, you know, the cars on the road, the transit buses on the road, the trucks on the road, the fuel that they're buying at the pump pays for the pavement that's on the ground. And so the federal highway bill is sort of the main monster funding mechanism for transportation. So it can be a 5-year bill, it can be a 3-year bill. Right now we're working on, I think, the 13th extension of what's called MAP 21, the last federal highway bill that was passed in 2009. So they're just, the bill ended and they say, what are we going to do? We can't get together, we can't develop a new bill, so let's just put a patch on it and we'll fund it at the level of the last extension. So really, we're not taking into consideration inflation and things like that when they're doing these patches to the bill. But for the most part, this is a huge bill. It's $38 billion. So on an annual basis. So the money filters down through the federal programs. It filters into the state, and the state through Caltrans, which is our kind of distribution system, helps distribute that. Some of the money comes directly to local agencies, to cities, to counties, but the majority of it comes down through the state. So the funding programs that we have to deal with here are the State Transportation Improvement Program, the Regional Surface Transportation Program, local transportation funds, some transit funds through the State Transit Assistance, the Federal Transit Administration, the Highway Bridge Program. There's some money that's recovered from transit fares. And then there's some other grant programs that you're eligible to submit grant applications on. Your project just has to be really good because you're competing with everyone else in the state. So those are challenging programs, but rural agencies are starting to do a really good job at developing applications that are powerful and can beat out the more well-funded applications coming from the urbanized areas. So we have two, for the regional transportation plan, everyone has to have one. If you don't have a project, if your project isn't in the regional transportation plan, it doesn't receive federal or state money. That's just the bottom line. So every project that we foresee for the next 5 years and 20 years needs to be in the regional transportation plan. So those two timeframes, 5 years, the regional transportation plan is a 20-year planning document. It's kind of like the general plan for transportation, but we update it every 5 years just to make sure it's fresh. We take out all the old projects that we've been developing and that have been delivered, and we put new projects on and massage the project lists so they make sense still. What we don't want is big projects to hold up a lot of money that don't make sense anymore. If you've got, there's agencies all over California that have these sort of legacy projects that they were going to build an interchange here because there was a bunch of development back in the 80s or 90s, and it's still on the books and people are still trying to push forward with it, but that project might not make sense anymore. So that's why we update it every 5 years, because we want to take a fresh look at the projects, make sure they're in the right order, and decide what we're going to fund in the near term, which we call the constrained projects, which we kind of have a good idea of how much money we're going to have and where we can put that money. And then we have the long term, the 11th year to the 20th year, where that's called the unconstrained project list. That's kind of the wish list. So there has been projects that have been pulled from the wish list to develop earlier just because they make sense. So when the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, ARA, was passed, President Obama, a few years ago, there was a lot of money on the table. And some of the projects weren't ready for construction money, and that's what the money was for. So people were scrambling, they were grabbing projects off their long-term lists, and therefore they were eligible because they were ready for construction, and those projects were getting funded. So you never know when there's going to be extra money available, but so the goal of the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, is just be prepared for anything that comes our way, which is pretty easy. You guys have done a good job of that in the past. you've got a really nice laundry list of projects. So the very steady funding resources, they're not big, they're not what we need, but the steady ones are going for to redo pavement, for roads, for bridges. We can fund 100% of our bridges now with federal money. We used to have to match it with local money. We don't have to do that anymore. So bridges, transit is fairly secure funding. Airports have a fairly secure funding. It's all at a lower level than we really need, but it's fairly secure. The one program or mode of transportation that isn't very secure is, or consistent, is the bicycle and pedestrian projects. Those have to go through the grant programs now, and they're quite competitive. So you just have to figure out how to develop your project from the ground up to be very strong and focus on the best projects for your area and develop applications in that way. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But so the short range, 1 to 10 year revenues, we're estimating at $84.5 million for the next 10 years to spend on all these things. The long range is $76 million. So in total, over the 20-year RTP period, which ends in 2035, we're talking about $160 million that'll go into the infrastructure conceptually in Siskiyou County. So this chart right here is pretty awesome because the county has 3,000 lane miles of roadway, which is enormous. How we judge the pavement condition is called a pavement condition index. We call it a PCI. That's what this acronym is right here. So it's basically the technicians go out and they look at the pavement. They do a lot of different measurements. They look for different types of cracking to tell what's wrong with the pavement. Is it going to get worse over the next 5 years, or can it last 5 years without touching it? That sort of thing. So they basically look at it and have this scaling system where they rate the pavement, and it comes out with a pavement condition index from 0 to 100. 100 being a brand new road, and anything below about 40 is pretty much on its way to being a gravel road. So the average PCI, the pavement condition index for Siskiyou County, is 57, which is below the state average. And this scale right here, here's 100. So once you start dropping in your pavement condition index, the more expensive the road gets. So to fix it. So to fix a road that has a pavement condition index of 70 to 100 only costs $2 to $4 per square yard. To fix a road that's between a 50 pavement condition index and a 70 costs $15 to $20 a square yard. To fix a road between 25 and 50 pavement condition index is $30 to $40 a square yard, and below that is $70 to $100 a square yard. So basically, in that lower range, you have to dig up the road, replace the base, and build a whole new road. Otherwise, in the upper levels, you can do some pavement maintenance, which is very cheap, $2 to $4 a square yard. You're talking about going out and putting liquid asphalt into the cracks to seal them so water doesn't get in there and crack and pull it apart. You're talking about doing slurry seals to protect the whole pavement. So things like that, the preventative stuff, which is fairly reasonably inexpensive compared to the rest. So you're at 57, you're at about right here. So you're talking, you're on the borderline of spending $15 to $20 a square yard, or going a little bit lower on probably some of your roads, $30 to $40 a square yard on your pavement. Yes, sir.
Does that count the city streets?
Yes.
City and county?
Yes. Yeah. This data, it came from this report that's being developed. every 2 years, this group of rural counties get together and pays, for some reason it's the LA County Public Works Department, but pays them to hire a consultant, I think because they kick in about $500,000 to do this, because they have a lot of rural areas in LA County, surprisingly. But so the rural counties get together and have this report done every 2 years. And this is only the second report. It came out in 2014. But they reach out to all the local agencies and they get their pavement information. And it's 97%. They've had a 97% return rate on that data. So it's pretty accurate. Whether the local agency is going out and doing their triennial, every 3 years inspections, that's another story, but they're reporting on what their pavement condition is on their roads. So anyways, that report in 2014, last year, estimated that Siskiyou County has a 10-year need of $604 million for just pavement for the roads. So if we back up and we look at how much money we think is going to be available, it's we have about $25 million available to tackle this $604 million need. So there's a big disjunct there.
So how does each community get funding? Do they apply for a certain percentage for the streets that need maintaining in their community? Or?
There's 2 ways to get it. So for this is for pavement we're talking about.
Correct.
So so one way, the federal government takes all the gas tax from actually the gas stations in California, sends their gas tax, whether it's a state gas tax or a federal gas tax, sends it all to Washington. The federal government sends it back straight to the local agencies. It's called the Regional Surface Transportation Program. They get a little bit of money depending on how many road miles they have and their population.
Okay.
So that's one way to get it. Then there's other money that is programmed through the regional agency, and it's that same program, the Regional Surface Transportation Program, and they get a little bit of money to do projects that are regionally significant.
So it's up to the community to determine what roads they're going to maintain each year.
Yeah, it is in some sense. Typically, the maintenance supervisors, the maintenance crews, the public works departments, they know where the money needs to go.
Okay.
So, they're the ones sitting at the table every 2 years developing their next program for sort of the big pot of money, which is the STIP. And they program that every 2 years. So to answer your question, there's a group in this county, in every county in California, that is made up of the Transportation Commission and all the public works departments and all the tribes that are federally recognized. And this technical advisory committee, they take everything they've heard from the public over the last couple of years. They look at the regional transportation plan, they look where things are going, and they decide, which roads are going to be paved.
So if we think our street needs attention, we have to apply through City Hall.
Sure. Yep. Talk to the Public Works Department.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does this include state and county roads? Like we have 96 and Highway 3 and.
Right. So typically state highways are just Caltrans does all that work.
Right.
But there are occasions where there's cooperative work between a county or a city and Caltrans. And I know there's a couple projects on this list on State Route 3, possibly on State Route 96, specifically at intersections, that it's a cooperative project.
Right.
Yeah. So essential components is another interesting part, because we can't just go down and pave a city street now and forget about the other parts of the street: drainage, sidewalks, crosswalks, and intersections. So those are called essential components. So when we're developing projects to pave streets, we have to build compatible facilities for people of all modes, and to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So essential components, there's a $25 million 10-year need identified in the county. I suspect it's much higher than that. And you know, in some spaces, it doesn't make sense to build sidewalks. So there's some discretion that an agency can use when they're developing a project, to where they say, you know, this development's out in the middle of nowhere. They're not going to need a sidewalk that doesn't connect to anything, and it just doesn't make sense. So, so we always have to be aware of that. So bridges, there's 179 bridges in the county, and they're actually in relatively good shape. Out of between 1 and 100, the average sufficiency rating is 82. There's probably some that are about ready to fall in, but there's also quite a few that are really structurally sound. So there's a $32 million rehabilitation need for the bridges, and that's a 10-year need. So the additional projects, like we talked about before, transit. So transit includes quite a few things. It includes buses, for one. It includes all the equipment on the buses. It includes bus shelters and signs and benches. It includes, in some instances, infrastructure pullouts, so they can get out of the travel way if you're in a busy area. It includes the operations, the washing, the maintenance, and the administration. So transit, you know, when you think about transit, most people just think, oh, there's a bus going down the road. There's a lot more to it than just that. Pedestrian facilities, very important to have connected pedestrian facilities for local agencies to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. They have to have a transition plan in place that says, this is what we have in our existing conditions, these are where the problems we have, and this is how we're going to fix it, and this is when we're going to fix it. They don't have money to do it. So every time they're doing a transportation project, the California Environmental Quality Act now says that you have to look at, you can't just pave the road, you have to look and see if that curb ramp is ADA compliant, and you have to replace it if it's not. If there's a connection that should be there that isn't, you know, a gap in the sidewalk or something like that, and you're coming through and paving the road, you have to build that sidewalk in. So it's a good thing, because we're moving toward, you know, a pedestrian-friendly environment where we're trying to reduce our obesity rates. We're trying to get ourselves and our kids out and be a little bit more active than they have been in the past. So that's hard to do in rural areas. So the least we can do is build a sidewalk where it makes sense between a couple of stores, and people don't have to drive from this store 2 blocks down to go to the next store. They just do the walk and then walk back to their car. It just makes sense. So bicycle facilities, you know, I keep trying to figure out why it hasn't been recognized that bicycle facilities are a direct link to economic development. Around California, people are demanding that there's a bike facility. They want to go out, they want to walk their dog on a trail. They want to take a walk, or they want to ride their bike. So when you talk about bike facilities and pedestrian facilities, you know, I always try to link in that economic development component, because it's really important part of it. In the last, say, 3 years, the public health groups in California and the state of California have really been involved in transportation, because they see somebody out there building something that they think is important, and so they're helping to even fund transportation projects, the Safe Routes to School projects. They're very active in, and any of the ADA compliant projects. And so the health industry is really keeping an eye on bicycle and pedestrian facilities projects, and they're integrating with the plans and the documents too, and helping fund some of them. And then aviation projects, you know, airports are kind of funky. They're sort of this this little entity that exists in areas, they're local airports, they're used by not the majority of the population, but they're important to those who do use it. They're important for emergency services, they're important for shipping, things like that. So aviation projects pretty much have their own set source of funding. They don't really stray from that very much, and it's not enough. So they're underfunded as well, but they do pretty well to maintain their airports with what they get. There's 2 airports in the county? 7?
And 7 Fiber County operated and 2 are operated by separate cities. Okay. And it's very sadly underfunded.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, we'll have to talk more about the airports.
Depends on if they're NIPIAS airports. If they're NIPIAS, they can get federal funding. And it's like Montague, they're not NIPIAS. So there's no federal funding available for it.
So you have to use the airport improvement program, which
that's through Caltrans, and we've been trying to get a runway because we've been getting hit on it for quite a few years on our runway. And there's no funding for us. Plus, we've applied with STIP. We've been on the list through STIP since 2008.
To get airport funding?
Yeah, for a runway.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, we'll talk more about that airport.
Can we go back to bicycles for a moment?
Yes.
What percentage of the transportation funding is designated for trails?
Trails that are on private land?
Back trails, like Rails Trails, Rails to Trails program.
Sure. So 0.
Well, that's not our understanding. There's a certain percentage designated for pedestrian and bike trails, but you're not aware.
So you might be talking about the set aside. So with local transportation funds, and let me see how much the county gets in LTF. There's a clause in the language that says up to 2% of your local transportation funds can be used for bicycle and pedestrian facilities.
But it's up to the community.
It's actually up to the Transportation Commission to decide whether or not they have a need on their regular roadway projects that outweighs the benefit of the bicycle and pedestrian. I don't know, there's some language in the law, but for the most part, there's not a lot of agencies that take advantage of that 2% bike head set aside.
Well, there's a bill that's just passed the Senate, on its way to the House about funding for bike trails.
Was that part of that?
According to our information that we got on the computer today, because Rails to Trails is always defending the funding for their projects.
Yeah, what you might have been hearing about was the bill that passed the Senate and Transportation Infrastructure Committee 2 days ago.
Right, it's headed for the House.
Yes, yes. So they're pulling it from a lot of different places: the DMV funds, the truck weight fees, the gas tax on diesel, and the regular gasoline tax.
Right.
Yeah, so that could beef it up. That won't go to the through the local transportation fund. It's a different program that will go. Probably the STIP, or maybe they'll beef up. What they'll probably do is beef up the active transportation program, which is the competitive grant program. So
now Arika did bike trails. Was it last year they designated bike trails like on Foothill? Was that?
Those bike trails are included in a construction project that's a complete road rehab. So, and my understanding is that project's already been put out to bid and it's supposed to be constructed this summer. So that is part of, like what he was saying, when you come in and redo the roadway,
right?
They decided to go ahead and put the bike paths in on the side as part of that project.
And so we understand that Highway 89 has been designated to, and this is out of our realm probably, but for a bike path. And so they want to use the old railroad so it doesn't have to go along Highway 89 from McLeod east.
Uh-huh.
So that's part of some of this funding.
And is that, was it an old rail corridor? So is that real rails to trails money? Oh, great.
The federal highway, they designated 89 as a bike trail. So they're trying to convert that money for widening 89 over and put the pavement on the rails and trails.
What a great idea. Yeah. So where the regional transportation plan could come into play, and probably any other countywide bike plan or active transportation plan that you guys are going to develop, is in the connectivity. So say that money goes for that trail. They're going to build it. They're going to stop it somewhere.
Right.
They're going to, not connect it to some of the other trails, things like that. So if it's on public property, especially in, county or city right away, then you can start thinking about trailheads and connectivity to other bike facilities that might be around.
So the connectivity is vital.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Yeah, it has been, the right of way has been designated to rails and trails already.
Uh-huh. Oh, great.
And the Rails to Trails project that they're referring to was amended into the RTP spring of 2014.
Oh, so recent.
Yeah, I'll need all the information on that.
Okay. Good. So, when I'm done with the presentation, and just be a few more minutes, you can come up and look at some of the bike projects that are on the project list. And these were projects that have been submitted by the city of Wairika and the city of Mount Shasta. Those are the only folks who've been, submitting bike projects into the regional transportation plan projects that I know about. We will discover all of these by the time we're done with this document. But you can take a look at these, see if there's any that stand out as really high priority ones. I'll be meeting with the cities and local agencies and talking about these projects in detail, and I can help foster sort of project developing a strong foundation for active transportation program funding application. So, okay, so we went through the pavement. Anything else on bike stuff that you wanted to bring up? Okay. So part of the regional transportation plan, there's actually 3 components. One is about policies, one is about projects, and one's about funding. So those are sort of the 3 main components. We'll be looking at the old policies. They are likely fairly solid. I already looked at them. They're in pretty good shape, but there's been some new legislation that will change some of those policies a little bit. Some legislation regarding performance measures, some legislation regarding the integration and of bicycle and pedestrian facilities into pavement projects. And there's one other main thing, but so we're going to be taking a look at the policies and making sure that they're pretty good. We'll run them by the public and make sure that the public has a chance to review them and comment, and then we'll put them into the document. The funding, basically it's a pretty finite resource. We know where it's coming from. I'll work with the Transportation Commission to figure out exactly how much we're going to project. Some of those numbers are available. Some of them we take a look at the past 5 or 10 years and then project that forward. And we're also going to be doing some projections for demographics in the area, and so we have to have all this stuff kind of in the plan to set the stage for developing the projects. Then we develop the project lists, the short range, the long range. I've already met once with the technical advisory committee, which is the tribes and the public works, the local agencies, and the commission and Caltrans, and we talked a little bit about the projects, but we probably have 2+ more meetings and then some private interaction between, just individual discussions on projects until we get those project lists really identified. So the next steps in this process are to do the demographic projections, the funding projections, look at the county's needs, and then we say this is how much revenue we expect this is how much in projects we have to build, these are all the needs, and there's a discrepancy here, so where's the best place to put the money? So, you know, one of the main things here is to make wise investments. So we get a little bit of money and we better spend it right, because if you don't, then you're wasting it. So that's the whole thing with the regional transportation plan. You just want to make wise investments. The state is looking at the investments you make in the county. So if you aren't making the wisest investments, the next time you ask them for funding, they're going to question why you built what you did when it wasn't the best investment of your money. The bridge to nowhere type of thing is kind of what I'm talking about. So then we'll do some project development, and we're going to have some more meetings. So in September, I'll be meeting with the Technical Advisory Committee, meeting again. We're having this one. We have a website for this project specifically, and I think we might have forgot to put it on the flyer.
Yeah.
So the website, you know, will have kind of meeting dates and information. We'll be posting the project lists, the drafts there, things like that. And it's a pretty good resource. We're recording this meeting right now, so that recording will be on the website. If anyone asked what was going on, you can say, oh, go watch this really interesting meeting online. And then we'll be doing some more direct stakeholder outreach, where we, you know, I'll go talk to the local agencies about their projects. They can invite others to the meetings if they want, but we'll talk about the projects directly. And then we'll have another community meeting to present the draft of the regional transportation plan and get comments back. We're going to be working a lot with Caltrans because they have a lot of projects in the county. And then that'll pretty much wrap it up. We'll probably be done with this draft in February is my guess, possibly early March, but we like to get them done quickly in our eyes, but maybe February, maybe 6 or 8 months isn't quick. So now I want to kind of ask you guys a little bit about projects. I've heard some questions about airport stuff, some questions about bicycle and pedestrian projects. And what we can do is look at the maps, look at the project lists, and talk about what you feel is the best use of funding in your communities. If you have specific projects that you think would be very competitive in a grant program, or if they're a project that's just super important, you know, we've been trying to do this for years, it's got to get done, that kind of stuff. It's kind of nice not to have a lot of people in the crowd because your voice really is heard. I mean, I've seen projects that just come from somebody's comments that come to fruition because they are participating and they're talking about them with us. So, you know, come up, take a look at the project lists and the maps, and we've got some pens. We can draw on these if we want, and so that's it. Any general questions?
Does the county still get money from the federal government, like payment in lieu of taxes or timber sale receipts to use for roads, or is that money all gone?
I think there was some extensions on the Secure Rural Schools Act, but it might have worn out maybe this year or next year.
It used to be a pretty good source of funds, but I think it's kind of dried out.
And the last thing I heard from the Public Works Director was that they've gotten their last large payment, which it used to be roughly around $2 million, and that's dwindled down to where it's not near as what it used to be, like 7. I think they're starting to kind of dip into their local funds and wondering how they're going to continue to operate the running room right now. And I just saw something about they extended it October 29th for another extension of some federal bills. So who knows what that will equate to for us.
I think there was another bill that was seeking to replace that funding altogether.
Yeah.
I don't know what the receipts were going to come from.
Yeah. But when I started with the County Public Works Department in 2009, it was almost $4 million. And by the time the last payment came in that I was aware of, it was under $2 million. So pretty significant for our area.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, so for the 10-year period, it was $11.2 million 2010. That's not a good chunk to lose. And part of that went to schools.
Yeah.
So this was 11.2 million that went to transportation. I think another half went to schools. So yeah, it's a big hit for everybody. So what are your interests? What sparked your interest to come to the meeting, and what do you guys care about?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm a member of the PSA2 AAA Area Agency on Aging Advisory Council. And one of the things, this is all 5 counties of the northeast of the state. Very few people know we exist, except for the people fundamentally who provide Meals on Wheels and all that sort of thing through various monies that come from the feds and the state. But one of the things our advisory council is very interested in is, especially for Siskiyou County, is better access to the general outside world. You know, we have one overnight Amtrak train out of here and 2 Greyhound buses that happen to stop and weed when they feel like it. And we used to have an Amtrak bus that came up here that they took off 3 years ago and didn't even come and tell us about. So fundamentally, I'm here, and I've put this on the card for them, and they've got the card. If you have extra comments, you should put them on. To ask that the document include a statement, and sorry for the handwriting.
Oh, I'll read it. That's all right. I can get that.
A statement that fundamentally says that Siskiyou County is committed to bringing back regional transportation in some fashion, either through stage going down to Reading.
Oh, interregional transportation, right?
Interregional transportation through stage going down to Reading and up into Oregon, which is done, believe it or not, by Modoc County. They go to Oregon and they go to Reno. I mean, it can be done if we work the numbers out right. And I think it could be done within the next 3 years.
So I want to comment on that really quickly. The problem that I've seen with interregional connectivity to sort of frontier counties like this is that it doesn't always pan out funding wise. So you talked about the Modoc stage going down to, it goes to Susanville and then to Reno.
Yeah.
They just had to cut it back because of the funding, but they still go once a week,
Well, the
which is
answer is
important.
we don't need 7-day-a-week service up here.
Right.
We need reliable, regular service. 3 days a week
Sure.
could do very nicely.
Yeah.
You know, but that can be negotiated. But we have to be on board to do the negotiation. So anyhow, just for the record, and I don't know whether you want this or whether I should give it to you, but this is the city council resolution that was passed at the request of the League of Cities, asking for more from Mount Shasta City Council. Yeah, they passed it last Tuesday at the request of the League of Cities for more funding for local projects through the state. The League of Cities is circulating this. I don't know whether any other cities in Siskiyou County have passed it, have they?
Yeah, Tule Lake was working on it. I don't know if they've finalized it or not.
Okay, well, that's the resolution they passed, which is really just take up of that. And I'm going down, when I leave here, to Modesto, when there's going to be a joint assembly select committee public hearing on rail. Now, these are the guys who fund, I should have brought a second one for you, I'm sorry. These are the guys who fund the buses that come up here from Sacramento for Amtrak, that's used to come here and went to Reading and now go to Reading. And the net result is to say to them, for three or four buses a day to Reading does not cover the needs of the 18 or so counties that are north of Sacramento. And there is a chance that this is going to get revised because the state just transferred its authority as of the first of this month, transferred its authority to manage the San Joaquin Rail Service and the buses that feed it to the San Joaquin County Joint JPA. And the JPA is going to be reviewing everything. I mean,
So you know what they're doing is, basically the San Joaquin, Altamont Express is a massive hub to take people into the Bay Area from high-speed rail coming up and from the Capitol Quarter coming down.
Yeah, but they
So
also,
that's gonna be sort of the collector for shooting people into the Bay Area. That's
well, it already is. I mean, that's.
right,
what's
but when
done.
high-speed rail comes in, that's why they're having all these meetings.
Well,
because
they're
it'd be
playing
like
around with that, but there's still two separate jurisdictions at the moment.
Sure.
But the end result is the San Joaquin corridor people are the ones who are going to administer the buses.
So why do they run, I'm just curious, why did they come up to Reading? Why are they sending buses up to Reading?
They've been doing that now for 20 years,
Oh,
15 years.
It's part of
been-
it. That's part of the throughway bus service that Amtrak runs to feed people on the trains.
okay.
So they have 3 buses a day that go between Reading and Sacramento. And one of those buses used to go all the way to Medford.
Uh-huh.
But they haven't done anything. It turns out, that I've spent 3 years trying to figure this thing out. And I finally got it in writing on the transfer from the state to the JPA. They give Amtrak a certain amount of money to contract these buses that Amtrak supposedly manages, which they do a lousy job of because you never see them. And it's all lost in the bureaucracy of the state and the feds. So the bus routes are determined by Caltrans doing computer studies. Now the new JPA, who supposedly has direct appropriation or direct control of it, and contracting with Amtrak, who contracts with the buses. So theoretically, they're going to be solving that mess. Theoretically.
So here's where it's pertinent to us,
Yeah.
is to receive the connections that currently exist
Yeah.
and receive the connections that are planned for the future, which doesn't really sound like they have
We want.
true connections planned.
We
So
want-
what we'll do,
Yeah.
is we can write some language into the regional transportation plan that will cover all of that.
Right.
It'll be easy. So for the purview of the regional transportation
Transportation
plan, I think we've got that topic covered.
Yeah, we want to say that we want the service.
Great,
And we want we'll negotiate to make it work.
sure, and if you don't mind, taking a look at the draft when they have it to make sure we got that language right and then provide comments, that'd be great.
And just for the record, they're setting up a group called the Statewide Working Group, which, because it's open, I've applied to be an appointee to it. I don't know whether I'll pull it off, but that's my letter of application. So if they'll buy it, we will finally have North Coast Northern representation on what is happening in relation to this network of 300, I mean, we're 300 miles from Sacramento. So anyhow, that's my game. I'm not, but I would like to be able to say tomorrow, and I don't know whether I can or not, but I came here to ask, can I say to this group in Medford that Siskiyou County will be on record, we expect to be on record, requesting additional interregional services in some fashion and in support thereof.
That
And I
sounds
think it's
more like,
probably too early for that.
I think so. And that's really a project-specific basis. So if projects come out of this process that we're doing right now, that say that that's our #1 priority project.
No, it doesn't have to be #1. It can be 5 years from now, but we need to be on record.
If it's on the list, sure.
I want us to be on record with the state.
Sure, you know what you could say to them tomorrow or whenever
Yeah.
you said, is you could say, we're talking about interregional
I can do
connectivity. Sure.
I talked to the interregional rail people when they put the interregional rail program together. And they said, we've never heard anything from Siskiyou County. They do not even recognize stage in the interregional transportation document.
Wow.
They're not even recognized there.
Okay, another comment.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that because this is also one of my issues. Siskiyou County's building a nice new transit center. And what's the county doing to try to get Greyhound and Amtrak back into it? Greyhound used to stop in Wairega and they haven't for many years. There's a state law that prohibits Amtrak from providing full bus service which Greyhound pushed through in 1999 because they didn't want the competition from the subsidized Amtrak buses.
And then they went away.
And then they went away. So the state law is still on the books. Amtrak can't provide full bus service. It has to be tied to a train trip. So I couldn't get a bus ticket from here to Reading or from here to Sacramento even, unless there was a train trip attached to that ticket.
Except that Stage can do it. And Caltrans has contracts with local bus companies, particularly over the coast from the Central Valley, that allow them to carry both local passengers and rail passengers. So it can be done. It's just a case of figuring out how to get it to work.
I'd like to see the county, as a matter of policy, try to get that law repealed. So
Well,
that
that should be part
Amtrak
of the deal,
has more options to make it more financially feasible for them to service rural counties.
Yeah, that should be part of the process.
I talked to Grace Bennett back when she was on the commission. I guess she's not anymore.
She is.
She is? Okay.
Yeah, but if you don't mind, I would like to answer the first part of your question about the Greyhound, because we actually had attended the transit conference last year, and I say I'm the transportation services manager for the county, but I'm also the executive director, so I kind of played a dual role there. And when I happened to see the Greyhound folks standing in front of me, I said, hey, we're building this beautiful new transit center, what's the possibility? And so they told me at that time that once we got the facility built, which will be done in November, to come back to them, and we're going to have some discussions. And the intent is to, at minimum, get them to stop here in Eureka and drop people off, because we don't want to compete with the Greyhound operator in Weed, because we realize that's part of his business and we don't want to take away from him. But in the same instance, we don't want passengers or residents, visitors, you name it, stranded in Weed when our buses aren't running, that late at night or that early in the morning. So we do connect with Amtrak at the train station in Dunsmuir. We have a lot of people that come up on the train or take the bus and go down to Dunsmuir and then wait there to catch the train. So there is that connectivity there.
It's not very good connectivity.
No, unfortunately it's not.
It's
The same
terrible.
could be said about our connection with Greyhound. We do have passengers quite almost a weekly basis that are calling us, trying to get to the Greyhound station. So we designed the facility with 2 spaces for buses that are Greyhound lengths, so 45 foot, which is not what we usually operate. So that was all part of the conceptual idea, and that's the way the facility is being built. So there's definitely that intent there, and we're hoping. So, and if we can,
What I'm really asking for in this document is a written commitment to the effect that we're going to work these things out. I realize there's a lot of detail that has to be worked out, but
well, and
I
the one
believe
thing you
if we
mentioned.
have this document, it says to the state that we intend.
Yeah,
to make
and the one thing you mentioned about the interregional connection, that's already been before the commission this year, and it's something that we're going to begin looking at as far as providing service to Reading, from starting in Eureka and going all the way south. It would be on a twice-a-week basis, perhaps. I know we have to look at the numbers, and like I said,
Sure, of course.
that'll have, the finances has to be there to support it. We have measurements, performance measures we have to meet at the state level.
Well,
So
can I
that's
say
something
to
that's come up.
can I say this to this commission, that we're going to be looking at this, reevaluating this in the next 6 months or so? For
You're
how we can-
welcome to say
become-
whatever you like, because you're a member of the public.
No,
So,
I want to be
that-
able to commit to, the county will be looking, or local transportation will be looking at this whole relationship to interregional issues over the next few
And we
months.
have them.
Pardon?
We're looking at, what the needs are of the residents. That's what
Right.
I'm at needs process is. The only thing I don't want it to be represented as it's from the commission, because ideally it's not at this point. We have had no discussion with them. I hesitate to use the word support, because it's
I'm not
something.
using the word, I won't use the word support. I'm saying that we will be reviewing this on a county basis, based on our need to find out whether it makes sense to extend our services beyond our county borders. That's what I'm basically saying. Indicating to the state that we are thinking about this. That's all I really want to do at this point. And then
It's all in the Transportation Commission documentation.
I just want to take advantage of this funding opportunity that these people want to put together and point out to them that they really need to review these bus services and make the interconnections, not just to us, but to the half dozen local transit districts that they ignore north of Sacramento.
We've been, as part of this regional transportation plan process, we reached out to Oregon, to a number of counties that border Siskiyou County. And so we're communicating with them on projects as well. And I'll talk to them about if they have plans in their purview or jurisdiction for interregional projects that could affect Siskiyou County.
Well, they're kind of interesting. They're paying for local bus service from Eugene to the coast in Oregon. The question is, would they pick up some of the cost from our county border to Medford if that
Depends on the ridership.
if that was re-extended?
You know, if they had a big draw of riders that they expected down here, they'd probably try it. I mean, that's what transit agencies do. You look at where the riders are going to be. If they're going to be there, you give it a try. You do a pilot program, and if it works, and
If they're going to pay for Eugene to the coast, they've got some mechanism in their law that allows some contribution to local. I think I understand actually the buses go to some other local point and then people change. That's okay, as long as there's a potential service.
Sure. Okay.
Anyhow, sorry, I don't want to take it. I just want to be sure that I'm open with you folks on what we're doing, what I'm doing.
So, any other comments?
I'll try another one. I'm curious, is the county supporting the reestablishment of freight service over Siskiyou Summit? I understand that rail line is being rebuilt, and I'm just curious is if you've heard anything about what's going on with that, and if the Wairika Western is going to be able to start up again and connect with Corp.
I've heard nothing of that. The board may have more information, but as far as the commission level.
The track's being, restored since that was happening.
They have quite a grant that came through, or loan or something,
Yeah, big grant.
to do the
Yeah.
track.
They have an awful lot of ties bundled up sitting next to it
All the way through.
all the way along. But when it's going to happen is anybody's guess.
Oh, it's happening right now.
Have you seen construction
Yeah.
crews out there? No, I haven't seen that yet.
So the issue is, there's a freight line that goes from Weed to Roseburg that's basically been shut down for 5 years. Been a long time.
Yeah.
Because the line is in such bad shape that the railroad company can't afford to fix it. They got a huge grant from, I think mostly from the state of Oregon, to fix it, and they're fixing it right now. But the Wairika Western, which is a spur from Wairika to Montague to connect to that line, has also been shut down, and there's potential to start that back up again, but they're pretty much broke. And I'm just curious if anything's going on with the Wairika Western, and whether that's going to be put back in service.
Well, I'll be talking to the county about projects. I'll probably pose the question to them, and you'll find it on probably the meeting summaries on the website, or I could contact you directly if you want some info.
Okay.
I might suggest talking to Steve Baker at the city library.
Put that on one of the cards.
Okay.
It's right here in town. So
Yeah.
you may know more about what's going on with that.
Typically Union Pacific or BNSF, the rail, is, they don't play nicely with others, and they are their own entity. All of a sudden you'll see a project going on, or, so they're kind of their own entities. And, the one thing that I think we could be concerned about, or may have some purview of with the regional transportation plan, is the spur. Obviously, that's probably an economic generator for the city up there, or for the community. What would be shipped on that spur?
Mostly plywood or veneer, lumber products, and there's some propane, I think, that they used to ship.
Okay, so you know, the spur could be something that, that I could see, you know, if there's trucks getting to the line, then, you know, maybe some transportation projects could stem from that. I couldn't see spending any of the dollars from these programs that are typically in a regional transportation plan on a spur, because it's almost like a private industry type of thing.
It doesn't matter of policy, you know, I think it needs to be addressed.
Well, for policy, certainly, because, you know, we're trying to generate a network of transportation systems and community that is economically doing well, and these are all part of it. So I think some of the policies would speak directly to those projects.
And the other issue with the Wairika Western is it used to have a steam train, which was a big attractant for tourists. And since the freight went down the tubes, that was what was supporting the steam train. And so all the steam equipment, I think, got sold off.
Yeah.
There's nothing left. But if that could somehow be brought back, that would be an economic benefit to City of Wairika.
The train is still there.
I thought the steam,
Yeah, the end.
the steam train, I think, is long gone.
Really? Number 19 is done?
Yeah, it's up in Oregon somewhere.
Yeah.
So there's another sort of recreational opportunity that, yeah, that's lost.
If we're gonna do that, we need to add the McLeod Railroad into it too. The track still exists. There's actually a McLeod Railroad owned yard in Mount Shasta, which connects over to McLeod. There's still track, I'm told, in the factory up there. I don't know what they're doing. I'm told they're doing some things like that. The end result is that is a resource that should be at least recognized. They haven't put it up for sale yet, so.
So I think those, the policies that were in the last regional transportation plan, would support
Yeah.
all of those projects.
Yes.
And certainly the policies that are going to be coming out of our draft of this plan will support those too. So you could, you know, whoever's developing, whatever private entity comes in and wants to develop this with a sack full of money, they can point to the regional transportation plan and say, yes, that document supports it, and you get all the other plans online.
Well, I mean, if we really want to be radical, for the next 20 years, we point out that there is a rail yard available for an extended San Joaquin passenger train in Mount Shasta as a terminal that could be owned by the San Joaquin people, which would mean.
You should bring it up at your meeting next week.
Huh?
You should bring it up at that meeting next week.
I'm bringing it up all over the place, but it's.
Oh, okay.
But the end result is they're saying they're gonna run the extra train to, I mean, somewhere along the way, they've been saying they're gonna run another train up to Reading. UP doesn't want it. They don't have any place to put it if they get to Reading. But if they came up the mountain, they would have a place if they played it right in Mount Shasta,
That'd be great.
you know. But
All right.
that's dreaming. It'd be a good jumping off place for a lot of things if they did.
Well, thank you guys for spending your evening doing this. You know, it's pretty important.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money on the table. It's going to be spent over the next 10 and 20 years, and we've got to make sure that it's spent in the right places, and your input helps. So I appreciate you being involved. For sure, you can find more information at the website. It's Siskiyou County RTP.
Yeah, I can write it down for anyone who wants it.
Yeah,
Siskiyou County RTP? Okay, I can find it.
RTP is regional transportation.
Yeah.
So,
Put a link on our county, the commission's website too.
oh, great idea. Yeah, you can go to the commission's website and we'll have a link there to the project website.
Okay.
And then, you know, I have some business cards too. If you guys want to get directly in touch with me, that's perfectly acceptable.
I've had my say, so.
Okay, thank you very much. And
Thank
eat
you.
a couple more cookies because those will make it
I've
better.
had my share of those too.